And that's how he is remembered by all. And that edge, that peak, that thing is what rock and roll is all about. You think, well, maybe it's better to just burn out than it is to fade away for rock and roll. Additionally, rock and roll is the subject of this song. Lists have never been very trustworthy to me. You should definitely start fighting with people as soon as they tell you that these are the top 5 songs ever written. That's enjoyable. Mathematics is not the same as music. The bottom of the site does not have a definitive response. However, you do notice which albums are stuck with you after 8 decades. That is not the same. In my lifetime, I've heard thousands of tunes. Some sounded amazing for half a year before going away. I liked some of the huge hits, but I never really needed to hear them again. A handful of them followed me for decades after that. You may hear one coming from a restaurant, an old radio, someone's automobile, or perhaps through a wall, and all of a sudden, it would halt you in your tracks. I am referring to those records. Whether they were flawless technically doesn't concern me. The pursuit of perfection may be somewhat dull. The sound of fingerprints on a record, an overly loud guitar, a voice that seems like it could break, and a drummer pushing against the music rather than sitting courteously behind it have all always appealed to me. The human person is located there, and that's there in every song I'm going to discuss. I wouldn't necessarily bring these 5 records to a desolate island. I'd definitely slip another one into the luggage if you asked me next week. However, I would find it quite impossible to disregard these 5 songs if you asked me which ones taught rock and roll something it didn't already know. The fascinating thing is they don't sound much like one another. One is based on an almost shattered guitar sound. Another moves like a folktale that has been passed down through the ages. It sounds like the world is about to fall apart. Another appears to hover between a dream and a recollection. And as for the final one, some could argue that it has no place on a rock list. They are able to inform me of that. In any case, I've ignored categories for most of my life. And effective use that are. Let's begin with a record that demonstrated that great music might be created without a lovely guitar sound. Sometimes all you had to do was turn it up till it began to fight back. A guitar with a slightly broken sound has a great quality. I mean it. Making instruments sound flawless costs musicians a great deal of money. The ideal microphone, amplifier, and space. Then someone comes up with something crude and inexpensive and creates a record that is remembered by everybody. When I return to You Really Got Me, that's what I hear. There is no self-introduction in that initial riff. It storms in. It doesn't really matter if anyone knew exactly what Dave Davy was opening up at the time he achieved that distorted sound by tampering with his amplifier speaker. What came from those speakers is what counts. It was unpleasant. Beneath it, Ray Davies had written something quite straightforward in the nicest conceivable way. I've always liked that aspect of the Kinks as well. Ray had a great deal of knowledge when it came to writing, but he knew that brilliance didn't imply cramming ideas into every available space. This song is fully aware of what it is. The riff shows up. The voice seizes it. The beat never stops. Additionally, the record has already served its purpose before you have had a chance to examine anything. Sometimes people forget how radical basic things used to sound when they look back. Distorted guitars are ubiquitous these days. Hard rock, heavy metal, punk, grunge, and 1,000 more genres have all been based on guitars that sound like they're being tortured. But let's return to 1964. There were teeth in that sound. It was more than simply the distortion, too. Many people are capable of making noise. Knowing what to do with the noise once you have it is crucial. It became an unforgettable tune, thanks to the Kinks. I've always thought that you should trust your one good idea. Don't hide it behind 20 other ideas, out of fear that others won't think you're smart enough. Listen to You Really Got Me. A planet may be carried by a single riff. Additionally, there was something else in there that eventually became important to me. It seems instantaneous. It doesn't seem like a committee refined it to the point where no one could identify the initial impulse. Before the electricity went out, it seemed like a band found something and recorded it. I've worked for many years to maintain that emotion. There are moments when a performance makes you realize you shouldn't touch it again. Perhaps something went wrong. Perhaps the balance isn't quite correct. It is irrelevant. It's alive. Don't touch it. For me, this record's lesson is that it was not intended for rock and roll to show up in clean shoes. The Kinks kicked it rather forcefully when it was meant to kick the door open. That's the 5th. The door is not at all opened by number 4. It takes a seat next to you and begins narrating a tale. And for some reason, you're still paying attention 50 years later. I was familiar with the band. This is a challenging one. You gradually stop hearing people's albums the way everyone else does once you've really shared stages, rooms, and extended periods of time with them. You can hear the personalities in the music, and when I listen to The Wait, I hear 5 players who grasped a concept that very few bands ever grasp. No one has to prevail. It's more difficult than it seems. If you put 5 gifted people in a room with instruments, eventually, someone will ask for more room. One more guitar solo, one more fill, one more instance where everyone is aware of who is playing. The band may take the opposite action. They could blend into each other. One of the best examples is The Wait. This bizarre collection of characters and pictures was written by Robbie Robertson. Nazareth, Carmen, Moses Miss, Chester is insane. As soon as you hear their names, it's as if you've entered a tale that started before the album ever started. No one provides you with a map. Excellent. I have no desire for one. Some rooms are locked after listening to the finest music. Then Levon Helm begins to sing, and all of a sudden it doesn't seem fake. The miracle is that Levon's voice imparted a sense of location. Roads, porches, churches, taverns, heat, and dust were all audible. None of it needed to be announced by him. It was just there. Richard Manuel and Rick Danko contributed their own voices to the recording, and the song appears to expand with each new vocalist. But pay attention, the band teaches you something behind the song. No one is flaunting themselves. The tune is served by the drums. The tune benefits from the bass. Garth Hudson offers you just enough in these small spaces when another artist may have attempted to make a big impression. That is self-assurance. Young athletes frequently believe that playing more is a sign of confidence. It usually refers to knowing when to stop playing. I had to discover that on my own. Silence seems terrifying when you're young and holding a guitar. You believe that you are necessary in every void. It doesn't. The band's finest musician can sometimes be found in the void. Because those guys trusted the music, The Wait has space to breathe. It stuck with me for another reason. It has an American vibe that is hard to replicate. Not polished, not patriotic. I'm referring to something more ancient and unfamiliar. Roadside tales, biblical imagery, gospel music, country music, blues, folk songs, and roadside stories are all blended to the point where it is difficult to distinguish between them. I heard that nation on that record, not the nation shown on a map. The song has a country feel to it. When we performed The Wait at the Last Waltz years later, the song already seemed to have been around for a lot longer than it actually had. That is not typical. The majority of songs are appropriate for their time. Somehow, this one came with a history, and it continued. For me, it's number 4 because of this. The third number is almost the reverse. It is not at all consoling. As soon as you hear the first few seconds, you sense a storm approaching. Some recordings never age because the emotion within them never goes away. Among them is Gimme Shelter. You can tell things are wrong before Mick Jagger even sings a word when Keith Richards starts to play. That's also excellent songwriting. Although words are important and frequently discussed, a guitar may tell you where you are even before the vocalist speaks. Here, Keith does that. It doesn't sound like an invitation in those initial notes. They have a cautionary tone. When the Rolling Stones let a little volatility into the room, they were amazing. They might be free without disintegrating. Walking that line is really challenging. Charlie Watts was mostly responsible for it. Charlie never appeared to want to prove anything. While everyone around him was causing mayhem, he was able to keep that band together. That type of drummer is unique. Additionally, you need that emphasis on Gimme Shelter, since everything around him seems uneasy. Do you recall the year this record was released? 1969. Everything was overshadowed by Vietnam. People's memories of political violence, protests, and assassinations are still vivid. A very gloomy cloud had grown over the optimism people prefer to recall from the 1960s. That shadow is audible, but this is the amazing part. The song doesn't turn into a newspaper. It doesn't teach you what to think or provide you with a list of occurrences. You get the impression that you are living through them. That is far more potent. Mary Clayton then enters the record. Thousands of vocalists have performed for me. I've been in studios when a technically perfect performance is given, and everyone nods because there is nothing wrong with it. However, nothing is the same as anything occurring. When Mary Clayton sings on this record, something occurs. She pushes that voice until its edge is audible. You couldn't create that sense of urgency with another 100 takes. She owns the entire record for a brief period of time. One of my favorite aspects about music is that a song can elude its creators. The home was constructed by the Stones, but Mary entered and burned one of the rooms. That is not something you can plan. Only when it occurs can you be intelligent enough to identify it. I've spent my entire life pursuing such moments. I've occasionally saved recordings that someone else may have cleaned up because of this. Don't take the life out of the take if it has any. Gimme shelter exudes vitality. Terrified existence. Angry life. Lovely life. When the world seems unclear, you may play the record more than 50 years later, and it doesn't sound like someone recounting history. It sounds up to date. I hope it didn't. Perhaps it is the depressing aspect. We alter the names. The dates are altered. We persuade ourselves that we are past some things. Then you identify the weather when that guitar starts up again. Gimme Shelter is ranked third because of this. The second number sends me in a whole other direction. No caution, no bloodshed. The room seems to vanish with only a few notes from an organ. I can't recall every initial listen. No one does. Memories begin to borrow parts from one another after a sufficient number of decades. Perhaps you don't recall the year, but you do remember the room. Perhaps they weren't the people you recall being there. It's okay. A file cabinet is not what memory is. It resembles a song more. And that's probably why I've always had success with a whiter shade of pale. The record itself seems like a recollection that you're not really certain is yours. The entire mood shifts when that organ starts. In that section, Matthew Fisher discovered something that was both entirely new and familiar. The album doesn't sound like a classical exercise, but you can sense Bach's influence. It sounds like someone discovered a rock band inside an abandoned church. Gary Brooker then begins to sing. What a voice! It has strength, but it also has an odd distance. He seems to be talking about something he has already lost. The experience is further complicated by Keith Reid's lyrics. Excellent. Songs were never necessary for me to act as instruction manuals. Songwriters are occasionally asked what a line means, as if there was only one right response tucked away in a drawer. Perhaps there isn't. Given how it affects you, perhaps the line has some significance. A whiter shade of pale is aware of that. You receive pictures, pieces. An odd evening was developing. People going from room to room. Talking. Bewilderment. Wish. I apologize. However, nothing is nicely wrapped up. You come back because of this. There might not be much of a purpose to listen to a song 100 times if it tells you everything the first time. Music has a long life because of its mystery. However, mystery is insufficient on its own. There is a lovely tune behind all those odd phrases. That is the basis. You still have something that can stand if you remove the poetry and mood. That's what I have always thought. A guitar may be distorted to sound like a train crashing through the wall. You may record in a barn or an upscale studio. The production may be as bizarre as you choose. However, the music must endure in the end. This one does. It also lives in silence. I'm impressed with that. It doesn't have to sound bigger every 10 years. A fresh coat of paint is not necessary. When that organ begins, the spell remains in place. Such records are rare. In several of the songs I've composed, I tried to add a little haze. Sometimes it matters more what you don't explain than what you do. In any case, that is how life is. You don't suddenly comprehend everything when you get 80. The exact opposite. You become aware of how many problems never had straightforward solutions in the first place. Perhaps that's another reason why I now value this record more. I heard the atmosphere when I was younger. I can hear the uncertainty now, and that's lovely, in my opinion. Thus, a whiter shade of pale comes in at number 2. There is just one song left, and this is the point at which a complaint will be made. They'll claim that it's soul music. They will claim that it is inappropriate for a list of rock music. That's all right. The label is a point of contention. I'll give the tune a listen. Sam Cooke didn't have to yell. The first thing is that some vocalists use force to persuade you. Until you give up, they press against the microphone. Sam could put in more effort. You may tilt in his direction. That orchestral sweep signals the beginning of a shift, and then his voice enters with an unteachable quality, grace. However, grace is not the same as gentleness. Beneath it is tremendous strength. Sam's voice was already among the best in American music. He had the ability to sing smoothly and effortlessly. He was aware of the gospel. He was familiar with rhythm and blues. He was familiar with pop music. However, this music sprang from a deeper place. He was reacting to the prejudice he had personally encountered in America and the civil rights movement that was making the nation face issues it had been avoiding for far too long. Blowing in the Wind by Bob Dylan was another song he heard. That link has always captivated me. A song might provide a spiritual, rather than a competitive, challenge to another songwriter. You think, I have something I need to say too, after hearing someone say something significant. That's how music flows. A match is lit by one person. From across the room, someone else notices it. However, Sam didn't copy Dylan. That's what matters. He went somewhere entirely on his own with that drive. There will be a shift that seems personal because it is personal. You don't hear someone explaining history to you from above. Inside history, you hear a human being. His voice is worn out. Fear is present. Dignity is present. And there is hope, despite all. That's what bothers me. When nothing has happened to test it, hope is inexpensive. Anyone who has had a good day may sing about tomorrow. Sam has a new kind of hope. It sounds well-deserved. I never get nostalgic over the song because of this. He's not telling you that things will be simple all of a sudden. He is more knowledgeable. He needs to believe in the change he's about to make before he can see it, since it seems so far away. That's bravery. And to me, that's rock and roll. Those who disagree with that definition are free to do so. Rock was never simply a distorted guitar to me. It originated someplace. Black American music, gospel, country, rhythm and blues, folk music, and blues are all ingrained in the structure. I'm not sure how to respond when someone tells me that Sam Cooke doesn't belong since the record is soul. Record labels always benefited more from those boundaries than did performers. They are traversed by a wonderful tune, and this one was everywhere. After creating music for most of my life, I've discovered something else. The most difficult topic is one that is important. That may sound counterintuitive, yet it is accurate. The temptation is to become large yourself when the topic is enormous. Instead of creating tunes, you start writing lectures. You dictate to individuals how they should feel. That wasn't what Sam did. He brought intimacy to history. That's what makes it so brilliant. Because it informs you of a significant occurrence, the song lacks impact. You can sense what the incident meant to one individual, which makes it impactful. It is more difficult to keep the past at a comfortable distance if you start to feel that way. An argument may not always be able to do it, but art can. I've composed songs on politics. I've composed songs about anger. I couldn't sit silently with what I was seeing, so I wrote stuff. And there's a risk each time you do it. The music might be consumed by the moment. Years go by, the headlines shift, and all of a sudden, the record is exclusive to the year it was created. There will be a shift in that. It corresponds to its historical moment, of course. It ought to, but it also continues to extend beyond it. Even if they didn't live through 1964, a young person might nonetheless relate to the pain it contains. The test is that whether a song can still locate someone in the present is more important than whether it can bring back memories of the past. And there's the awful realization that Sam Cooke didn't have decades to witness the development of his song. At the age of 33, he passed away in December 1964. Without him, the music went on. Perhaps that's why hearing it now has such significance. But due to the tragedy, I don't rank it first. Tragedy is not necessary for the album to be great, which is why I put it there. Eliminate every aspect of Sam's life. Pay attention. There is a melody. There is the voice. There are the words. There is the emotional reality. That's sufficient. At the age of 25, I may have told you that the best rock song required a guitar that made me want to turn up the volume. I'm not sure at 80. The best songs, in my opinion, are those that, after they're done, make the room quieter. You don't grab another record right away. You take a seat. Perhaps it is the sound of brilliance, not cheers, quiet. Sam Cooke was deserving of that quiet. My top priority is to bring about a change. I've done the stupid thing now. I've chosen 5. The ghosts outside the door are already audible to me. Chuck Berry should be included in this discussion. Buddy Holly agrees. Before breakfast, Dylan could offer you 5 tunes. Songwriting was profoundly altered by Lennon and McCartney. Hendrix altered people's perceptions of what an electric guitar might do. I could continue. Lists are risky because of this. They are helpful, though. For another reason, they force you to listen once again. I would just ask viewers to do that. Return to these documents without seeing them as monuments. Don't pay attention just because someone informed you they're classics. Put on some headphones. Switch off any other noise-producing devices. On You Really Got Me, listen to the guitar. On The Wait, pay attention to the distance between the musicians. Hear the terror that exists within Gimme Shelter. Allow that organ to transform you into a paler shade of pale. After that, spend some time sitting with Sam Cooke. That's sufficient. The music doesn't age as quickly as you do, which is an odd aspect of growing older. A record is waiting just where you left it. For 20 years, you vanish. You lead a brief life. You lose people. You're not perfect. You have second thoughts about things you previously believed to be clear. Then, one day, a speaker plays that old tune once more. The same voice, the same guitar, the same 3 or 4 minutes. However, you are unique. Additionally, the music has changed in some way because of how different you are. I continue to listen because of this. The greatest recordings still haven't told me everything they know after all these years.